Well, your playing's cool because I feel like you reject a lot of the standard like Guitar Hero
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. A lot of it was like rejecting it. It's like, oh, I don't think I should do like big bends like that because it's gonna sound like that era. Like the boomerish sound of like a.
Wait a minute. I'm a boomer and I bend. Is this something I need to be worried about? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today we'll move beyond boomer bends. Now, bending is simply a technique that we as guitar players have enjoyed doing for decades. But if you think about it, it really is a science, right? You're bending a pitch to another pitch. You really have to have control of this to add some authenticity to your playing. A few years ago, Rick Beato hosted a roundtable with some modern guitar players. Tim Henson was one of them, and they coined this phrase boomer bends, in which Tim Henson said, sort of big bends sound boomerish. So somebody asked me about this recently, and as I was trying to formulate my answer, my response, I realized that bending is really like, there's a toolbox with all kinds of different stuff in it, all kinds of different bending techniques, all kinds of different capabilities. And what we want is something really complete, right? A library of techniques that's really complete. Now, to be fair, Tim wasn't necessarily discouraging big bends, but I think as a modern guitarist, he felt that was something he needed to avoid, right? Sort of a cliche trope that he wanted to sidestep so that he could really bring something brand new to the instrument, which I believe he does. And in fact, modern guitar players bring a whole new series of bending techniques to the library. And so I feel that we should really strive to master all of them, right? The bigger your toolbox, the more stuff you have in it, the more choices you have to make, right? The more variety you have in your playing. You're probably watching this video for a little insight, right, into how this instrument works. Maybe there's a disconnect that causes some frustration between how music works and your capability to understand the instrument, right? I can help you with this. I do this for a living, and I do it in an online guitar academy that I call the Studio. I built the Studio with one thing in mind, and that was to replicate the experience I had in music school for guitarists who either couldn't afford to or didn't have access to a formal music education program. I curate an ongoing library of weekly studies. I teach live deep dive courses on multiple subjects. I host live QA sessions. I even facilitate in-person workshops. All of this and a lot more is available in the Studio. Now, I understand that an online guitar academy might not be for everybody, but if you're willing to put in some work and you really want to understand how this works, we can get you there in the Studio. You can get access to the Studio through my Patreon page, and right now there's a 7-day free trial. You can get in there, take a look at everything free for 7 days just to see if the fit's right. And if you do decide to study with me, I look forward to working with you. So regardless of what boomer bends actually are, what we really are going to focus on today is, where is our bending? What is our capability right now? Can we bend in tune? Do we even know what we're bending to? What notes are available? That's the nut we're going to crack today, and we're going to do it with the minor pentatonic scale. Let's zoom in, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. The most important thing in bending is that you're bending in tune. You're really raising the pitch of a note to another note. We just want to make sure we're in tune. We're going to use the minor pentatonic scale. That's the A minor pentatonic scale as sort of our test bed to make sure that we can map out and catalog the notes that we can bend and make sure that we're bending them well, right? That they sound good when we do. The very first thing we need to figure out is the distance between these notes to figure out which notes we can bend. In other words, which notes are close enough to other notes in the scale that when we bend them, we can actually hit those targets. You may or may not already know this, but the minor pentatonic scale only has 2 intervals. The minor third, which is a spread of 3 frets, and the whole step, which is a spread of 2 frets. If I just take this scale and I put it on the A string as a linear scale, it's really easy to see the distances. That first distance from the root to the minor third is 3 frets. Classically, the minor third is a hard interval to bend. It's not easy, especially if you have heavier strings or you're bending down by the nut. So we're going to leave that one out, and we're only going to use the whole steps. The whole steps occur between the flat 3 and the 4 and the 5, and the flat 7 and the root. You can see these whole steps here. right? So let's start with our pentatonic scale. We're going to go all the way to the top of the scale. And we're going to catalog the bends and we're going to descend. In other words, we're going to find out which notes we can bend and we're going to go through the whole scale. This first note, in other words, the highest note in the scale, happens to be that flat 3. We know we can bend that one up a whole step. Right, there's our target note, just up a whole step. The next note in the scale is the root. That one has a minor third interval to the next note, so we're going to skip that. And just to sort of demonstrate it, listen to how terrible it sounds if you bend the root. It's not a good note to bend, right? Because it's not going anywhere. It doesn't have a destination that's close enough to bend to. That takes us to our next note in the scale, right? This note is the flat 7. The flat 7 is a whole step away from the root. That one bends really well. There's our target. Right? Flat 7 to root. That's a good bend in this scale. The next note in our scale as we descend is the 5. Again, that's a minor third away from the next note in the scale. That's not going to be able to be bent. It's just too much of a stretch for us. The next note in our scale is the 4. As we descend the scale, the 4 is a whole step away from the 5, so this can be bent up a whole step. Here's our target. That one sounds good. That one's a good one to bend, right? The next note in our scale is a minor third, that flat 3. That's also a good note. It's only a whole step away from the 4. It's a bit of a tough bend with your index finger. The next note we get to is our root. We can't really bend that. It doesn't have a place to bend to, right? There's no place that's close enough to the root to bend to. And right below the root is our flat 7 again. I usually have to go down and get more fingers behind this one to bend it up a whole step. Next note is our 5. Again, too far away from any note to actually be a target. We can't really bend that up. So we go down to our 4, which does bend up nicely to the 5. That leads us to our flat 3, which bends up nicely to the 4. And finally back to the root. So I'm just going to go catalog all of those whole step bends for us again. So there they are, all of those whole step bends cataloged. We can see now where they are. We can tell when we're in tune. We have the strength to bend up a whole step on those notes. Sometimes we've got to shift our strength down to get more fingers behind the bend. Whatever we have to do, but at least now we can hear what we're doing and we know what we're doing. Now I want to share one more thing, and that is each one of the bends in the pentatonic scale, these whole step bends, can also be expressed as a microtonal bend. Microtonal means it's just not quite a half step. It's a smaller distance to the note than our smallest distance of one fret. So let me just show you what that sounds like. Here's our minor third. When I bend this up to the 4, it sounds great, right? I can also use a microtone bend, which is basically bending it a little less distance than this. Right? Doesn't sound great against the root by itself, but as a way to resolve that minor third back to the root, it's not quite the major third. It's a microtone, right? When we get down to the flat 7, we can do that same thing, that microtone bend, and resolve back to the root. Those bends are really, really small. Right? Not quite to this. Those would be the half step targets above them. But they're microtones. And then this last one, the 4, bends slightly up just past the 4. That one sounds great too. The half step bend here would be to that flat 5 here, but you can use a microtone here if you want to. So here are all those bends as microtones. Right? Here they are as whole steps. And as microtones. Well, as you can see, there's a lot to unpack about bending, right? It is sort of a science, right? We're not just bending a note, we're actually using that pitch, we're raising it to find another pitch. And regardless of whether it's a whole step bend to get to a specific pitch, or to really control those microtonal bends, doing it well and having control over it brings a real authenticity to your playing. And the more variation you build in, the more variety you have, right? The more different tools you have to access. Tabs for this lesson are available at my Patreon page. You can also get access to the studio there if you'd like. There's a 7-day free trial. Head on over there if you want to grab the tabs or take a look at the studio. As always, I hope this lesson has been interesting for you. I hope you learned something new. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.